Hey guys, it's me, EODGamer here, and there are roughly 3 types of people that are going to be watching this video and interested to know how to play Topaz. The first group of people are probably interested in playing her to support a main DPS that you really already love, and you're looking to buff them up more because maybe you see that a kid has like follow-up enhancing abilities. Characters like Jingyuan, Clara, if you're one of those mains, you'll probably be interested in the first section here we'll talk about. But for the second group of people, I think are looking for a main DPS. Perhaps you don't have Zealer, or maybe you already have her, but you are looking for another fire type DPS, and you are actually considering Topaz and Numby seriously to fill in your main DPS roster. I think that will be the second group of people as well. And of course, in between here and there, we'll talk about some team comps for a mix of both of them if you're like in between on the fence. But the last group of people, of course, I have something for you as well. You don't care about meta at all, and you just want to play waifu characters that you really enjoy. You think she's hot, you like her design, so do I, but I'll also be teaching you how to build good teams for her, because you don't want to play your favorite character in a bad team and then she doesn't do damage and you get upset. So something for everyone, and even free to play to this the end. If you have no 5 stars at all, I'll also teach you a team how to build around her just to get you off the ground running as well. You know we don't waste time on this channel, so let's go ahead and jump into the first group of people. The people that are going to play her for a long time in a supportive role that has longevity as well. And I think the first role, of course, that we will be thinking of is a character like Jingyuan and a character like Clara. These two are very similar characters. They can main DPS carry your roster. Very strong units by far. One is a limited 5-star, one is a standard 5-star as well. I think their team compositions are quite similar. I'll put it out very clearly. I think the best support out for both of them will be Jingyuan. Sadly, every other character likes this character. She's just so strong as a 4-star. The other option that a lot of people are thinking of likely will be a character like Esther. And I will tell you why she's not very good for Clara. And that is mainly because Clara doesn't care too much about speed. The main benefit that Esther has over other characters, other Harmony characters, is mainly her speed advancing that she pushes the whole team, as well as of course being fire element. Some stuff that other Harmony characters don't really do, other than Bryan, who's like single target push in that sense. So Clara doesn't benefit from that second part from Esther in terms of the speed boosting requirement. She's more of a counter attacker, so it's how fast the enemies act rather than how fast she acts, which is why Bryan doesn't really work super well with Clara. And I think definitely Jingyuan is going to be a little bit better for Clara. But that aside, I think Esther is definitely a very solid support for Topaz and Numby. But for those of you who are looking to buff up your main DPS, likely that will come as a secondary thing. I just wanted to point that out. I still think she's a good situation here. More so than without her here, definitely, Esther's position. So that's for the utility side of things. I shared a bit of my opinion there already. For the sustain, there are 2 main ways that most people likely will go. I think the simplest option will be a character like Nickss. Nickss adds aggro to Clara, giving her a good amount of aggro draw, energy restoration, and also able to like proc her counters, keep your squishies here and here out of danger as well, because you have some aggro draw to a relatively chunkier unit. So I think Nickss is definitely a pretty solid option. Not all of us has Nickss, and one that comes to mind would definitely be a character like Marsden. I think Marsden has a nice in-between combination of both drawing aggro to Clara, protecting the team with a bit of shield, especially if you have her at E6. She does heal your team a little bit more as well, which is quite attractive, and if you run her fast enough, able to probably solo sustain on easier floors without much AoE damage. Has also counters similar to Clara, so you get a lot of follow-up procs for Topaz as well. One of the downsides of running her with Clara, I think, is that if you freeze enemies, means that they will likely miss one turn and they won't be able to attack, which means that Clara doesn't counter. I think that is a small issue for now, but of course if you are focusing on like Marsden as a freeze unit, likely you will struggle a little bit, especially in Memory of Chaos floors where the freeze lasts longer or they also have freeze on their own. Might be a bit trickier to run, but that's like the broad general concepts that we have. Any other sustained characters really can fill this role quite well. Like you have Natasha, you can run Bailu, you can run the meta healers like Luota, Fucc likely will work well also. The only thing is Japad might be a bit trickier to run, especially if you have a character like Clara, but I think that is besides the point. I think most sustained units will work quite well. That is for these 2 units. The other 2 hyper or follow-up carries that people might be looking to buff would likely be a character like Himiko as well as Kafka. These 2 are also have follow-up abilities in their kit, and they do synergize with Topaz, but they don't revolve around it mainly. So I'll leave this towards the waifu section because they are both very attractive waifus, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. Mostly this section is really talking about these 2 units here. But first, to be fair, let's jump in with the second category, which is the Hypercarry category, slipping on my words here. And this is for people mainly who are looking for a main DPS character in the game. Maybe you joined recently, or you already have Zealer, for example, or maybe you don't want to pull her and you're looking for another Han DPS like Topaz with a bit of a fire element as well. I'll be talking about like both of the differences and who's the better investment in another video. You can check back on the channel. Likely will come out this week or next week as well, so stay tuned for that too. So for Topaz and Numby here, in this category, she's really looking for buffers that help boost her up in the Hypercarry category, which would be your supports like Esta, Bronya, as well as Jingyuan. They all work fine, but I think this is a strong case for where Esta is actually going to shine. Why is that? It is because if you think about all the characters in the game, these two characters are loved by almost everyone, whereas Esta is like kind of mid, not really the best in most of the other characters that we have in the game, but because she's fire typing and doesn't mind the additional speed and attack that she gives to her, I think that Esta likely will outperform from a team totality, building two teams, especially if you only have one of these two characters. So you can put Esta on this team, you can put these two characters on the other side, but if you are a whale, you have like every single unit. I think you'll find that Jingyuan likely will also be very attractive here to be placed in place of Esta as well. So that's my thoughts for the buffing category. The utility category can go in either way. You can look for the defense breakers like Silver Wolf, who is a single target defense breaker. You can drop in like fire weaknesses and whatnot. Or you could also run like characters like Pella with a bit more AoE defense breaking. And those a bit more adventurous can just choose to like whatever you didn't run here, or maybe you have like more money and more resources, you can just run like double Harmony also, which is why I put like Harmony's logo here. I think that will fulfill quite nicely a Hypercarry role. Generally, the Hypercarry role will struggle in one aspect, which is sustain. And for the most part, we don't have like solid sustain characters that can solo sustain the entire team, especially if there's a lot of AoE damage from the enemy. Characters that can solo sustain very easily will be like Bailu, Japad, the 5 stars in general. Links to some extent, especially if well built, can probably self-sustain too. And a character like E6 March 7 is, I think, probably the best if you can manage the sustain. She has counter in her ability, which helps out proccing this ability too. And on top of that, she also at E6 can heal a bit, she can freeze the enemies, a bit of control as well. I think it's a interesting pick for a Topaz comp. But the issue mainly is if you don't have her at E6, which not many people likely do, it's quite expensive to get an E6 4-star character, you could consider other options that give you that solo sustain until, of course, we one day find a character that can solo sustain and is perfect for Topaz and Numby. That will probably replace this category too. So that is for Hypercarry styles. And now let's go on with the Mono Fire. I have no idea what this is. Well, I think this is a typo. It should be Topaz. So anyway, the Mono Fire teams, it will be very similar to what we see previously, just that we are force-fitting it in a more of like a mono or duo fire comp. And I'm just going to uncover it real quick. Buffing categories, I think fire definitely speaks for itself. You want to buff like fire type units. Your utility here is going to be a bit more varied, because you have fire type characters that you can put. Maybe you just pulled the new Gui Naifen and you want to play her as well. I think it's possible, especially if you don't have like the 5 stars. So it's like triple fire, 4-star here. And Silver Wolf is good because you can implant fire weaknesses. You have the single target damage defense down to increase her damage as well, synergetic with like a Han character. And Himiko is complementary because she's a 5-star AoE DPS, which is something that Topaz and Numby would appreciate a little bit more. And that is another angle that you can be playing it too. The last category here is a bit trickier. Mono Fire is a bit tricky to run because Fire MC can't solo sustain by herself. Likely only easier floors you can run her, and in that case you might be forced to like run another sustain in this slot in place of Esther, which I don't really like at this moment. I think what is more interesting would be a duo fire and duo quantum team. In this case, my top pick for like a mono or duo fire team would probably be like Topaz and Numby plus Esta plus Silver Wolf, and last but not least you have Nickss, because Nickss does offer a lot more reliability and sustain compared to Fire MC. But with this team here, you do lack a bit of AoE damage, especially with Silver Wolf in the roster, and that is something that is worth considering too. If you don't care about that, you want to run AoE DPS, I think Himiko running a full fire team likely is okay, but there are definitely downsides to this mono fire team. What I would like to see in future is a fire unit that can solo sustain the entire roster and is relatively synergetic to allow the utility to be a bit more offensive. I think that's what I'll be looking for to round up this mono fire team. At this stage currently, to run like pure only fire, I think it's a bit tricky. Can be done on maybe weaker floors the enemy doesn't do much damage as of version 1.4 of course. So that's it. Now let's talk about Team Waifu for the third category of people that don't care about meta at all and you just want to run perfectly good looking characters, all female, and this is what this section is for. So of course, I'm gonna go real quick because this is just trying to help you maximize your account. Estar, Jingyuan, as mentioned, these two are going to be solid characters. They look good as well. Bronya and Silverwolf also are good characters to play. Silverwolf I think can fit both in the utility section and the buffing section depending on where your current game state is, which is the current characters that you have. Himiko, Kafka I think are very, very solid picks. As promised, let's elaborate a little bit on both of them because this is similar to a Hypercarry kind of role. Himiko here is going to be your AoE DPS. Topaz is your single target DPS. Both of them have follow-up in their kit, which makes them slightly more synergetic as well. Very, very good function in my opinion. So Himiko's downside is you will need a lot of buffing for her, which Estar does provide. You can run Bronya, you can run Jingyuan, which all three of them benefit her quite a lot. The only one out of these three that probably doesn't benefit as much to her will be like a character like Silverwolf. But otherwise, I think three of them plus her and anyone in the sustain category likely will be okay. Especially if you have like March 7 at E6 and sustain like isn't super big of an issue. I think that's another thing to consider. Kafka also has a follow-up in her kit. Every time that she finishes her turn, she can follow up one time if you have one teammate that auto attacks. So for example, if you have Jingyuan here who smacks the enemy once, she follow-up attacks that counts also, which is synergetic with Topaz and Numby. She does a bit of DOT in an aspect in an AoE. So a character like Estar with burn in her auto attacks. If you have a character like March 7 or with the light cone, or perhaps like Fucc with the light cone, the one that procs DOT, I think is the trend of universal market. That one procs like fire DOT, which is synergetic with DOT roster with a bit of DOT here, but more so follow up here, and March 7 also follow ups up. So that will be an interesting way to run a team waifu that is a bit unorthodox, but I think it still can be worked around. And your sustain here, of course, I think March 7 will work best with her because of her follow-up counter ability. At E6, only then is she really able to like solo sustain better. But otherwise, I think you will probably need to rely on a character like Fucc as well as Natasha. And if you don't care too much about waifus, I'm sure you can fit on like a lot of other characters as mentioned already. Maybe you just have to swap one waifu out, but this is just force-feeding waifus in the same team. And last but not least, let's talk about free-to-play units. Not everyone has 5 stars. So a lot of these other sections, you'll realize maybe you don't have those characters, you can't really complete it. I'm going to just teach you very, very fundamentals where everyone can build these units. So in the first category, buffers, Estar is a free-to-play unit. Everyone has her. I think she's going to be the best, easiest to run, and as well as overall account building, you will find that Estar likely won't find much competition for other teams. Topaz does use her the best. Fire characters generally does use her the best out of other Harmony units as well. So overall account building, you can always like slap one of the meta Harmony units on another team later on. Good for your whole account too. Utility. Utility here is really what Topaz will lack of, and I think that is mainly AoE damage, which is why I recommend a character like Serval. I think Serval gives a very good amount of AoE damage. Doesn't have follow-up in her kit unfortunately, but you will get the AoE damage to survive in the meantime for you to maybe get more characters in the other sections that we mentioned, the other 5 stars, to help you like buy a bit more time, get a bit more of your resources and gems. Herta, I wouldn't recommend most new players building her, especially since she doesn't scale as of 1.4 very well in the Memory of Chaos, which means that even though they combo a little bit well, you might find it a bit restrictive as well, going to enemies that are much larger and fewer and far between. Hunt characters generally will play into those environments where you don't have so many side mobs. That's when I think Herta does underperform. Because if you only have few units, she doesn't do that guru follow-up, likely will struggle a little bit more. But that's just my thoughts. For sustain, I think we'll have 3 options. The main issue for a free-to-play player, you likely won't have much Eidolons of March 7, so this is a bit tricky. But you could always shift one of the like Fire MC onto here to give you a bit of AoE damage from the burst. Won't be doing a lot of damage, but at least you have some with a double sustain here from like Fire MC and like for example, Natasha here or March 7 here, and you can bring like Natasha to the other roster as well. Running a Fire MC and March 7 combo, like in this and this, allows you to have some follow-up here, some fire buffing for the 3 of them, and you have at least 2 sustain units, and you should take your free-to-play account quite far in the game as you collect more Stellar Jades and decide what you want to do with your overall account. And we have a lot of other guides on the channel, such as like comparing Topaz and Numby versus Jingyuan, as well as Topaz and Numby versus Zilla, which we'll do in a little bit. I'll link them in this video here, and we also talk about build guides and everything on the channel. Stay tuned, we do this every patch, and thank you so much for watching. See you in the next video.